We often treat trauma as a structural failure, a permanent crack in the mind that leaves us fundamentally broken. But the human mind didn't evolve in a vacuum. It was built to navigate a world of constant physical, emotional, and social friction. It was forged in environments that collide with us. External pressure is the primary driver of development. Without resistance, the organism lacks the necessary stimulus to build strength or a sense of identity that can hold up under weight. Your mind and nervous system were never engineered for stillness or comfort. You are a system designed for survival in motion. To manage this daily friction, the mind maintains a specific interface, a porous boundary layer known as the ego. Look at how this layer filters the chaotic swarm of external data down into a manageable stream for the central node. This interface prevents the system from being overwhelmed. It translates the world in real time, constantly deciding what matters, what to ignore, and what to fear. It keeps the internal rhythm stable. If the human system possesses such a sophisticated filter for handling friction, we have to look at what specifically happens when that interface fails to do its job. The ego is a high-functioning tool for standard loads, but it has finite limits. It remains vulnerable to high-velocity events that arrive with more pressure than the filter can process. In this mechanical context, trauma is a capacity overload. It occurs when the velocity and intensity of an experience exceed the system's ability to digest it. When an experience hits with that level of intensity, it bypasses the filters entirely. The data isn't processed. It slams into the system and shatters into raw geometric fragments. This is the mechanical definition of trauma, unprocessed experience. These fragments float within the system, unable to connect to the central stream of data because they were never translated into a story the mind understands. These shards are active. They periodically vibrate, sending distortion waves through the system that we experience as sudden anxiety, physical tension, or reactions that feel disconnected from the present moment. These reactions are the mind's attempt to close an open loop. It keeps returning to these fragments because it is trying to complete the processing task that was interrupted by the initial overload. Feeling broken is the byproduct of a highly functional system, desperately trying to clear a backlog of data it wasn't equipped to handle at the time. To understand how the system recovers, we have to look deeper into its architecture, separating the surface-level reactions from the foundational core. This cross-section reveals that the chaos is localized. The shattering and the resulting distortion waves are isolated within the interface and the surface layer of the mind. Beneath that noise sits the foundational architecture, the part of the system that existed before the event. Because trauma is an overload of data, it can clutter the system, but it cannot rewrite the underlying code that allows the system to function in the first place. While your habits, reactions, and daily thoughts may feel different, the foundational core of the system remains stable and intact. It provides the steady platform required for the next phase of the process. Recovery is the mechanical process of integration. It is the active reorganization of those isolated fragments into a functional whole. This requires the conscious effort of retrieving the unprocessed fragments and placing them into the linear timeline of your life. You are taking the raw data that once overwhelmed you and building it into a sequence you can carry. This reorganization happens through small, consistent actions, choosing your environment, allowing emotions to move, and maintaining a connection to the physical body to stabilize the system. Eventually, things shift. The fragments lock into the timeline. The internal noise drops and the distortion waves cease. The past finally fits into the system's memory without triggering a response. At this point, the system has finally succeeded at the processing task it was originally forced to postpone. This process does not return you to the person you were before the friction began. The original version of the system lacked the structural capacity to handle the load it encountered. To simply go back would be to remain vulnerable to the same overload. Observe how this structural reinforcement builds over the fracture, becoming denser and more robust than the original material. This is a system with expanded emotional range and a much higher threshold for friction. The biological system that survived the initial overload has effectively rewritten its own capacity. Through the act of integration, it has upgraded itself to master the very friction that once overwhelmed it.